think we have a pretty decent group so far. So I think we should probably go ahead and get started as people funnel in. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. First, I want to say welcome for joining our webinar on winning in the AI era. My name is Dana Bullock, and I am marketing manager here at Blue Seedling and your MC for the day. For anyone who's new to Blue Seedling, I'll introduce us in just a second, but I want to say that we're thrilled to have you join us for AI positioning in 2024. We're going to jump into a wealth of topics, but first, I would love to have you introduce yourselves, as we just mentioned in the chat. If you want to throw in your names, your company, your favorite color, your animals' names, pictures, anything that you want to share in that chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. So first, we're going to talk about our flow for the day. Our speakers, who you'll see and I'll introduce in just a second, will be walking us through all things AI positioning with some interactive questions for you sprinkled throughout. And we'll have some time at the end to answer questions. But if you have any questions that you have, or if you think of while we're chatting, feel free to throw them in the chat with your introductions, and we'll answer them all at the end. The session is being recorded, which you might have noticed, and we'll be sending the recording out to you after the webinar is over so that you can rewatch it. And we will also be sending a short survey via email so that we can get your feedback on how this webinar went. And then for all of you that joined us today, we're offering a free AI positioning consultation with Jordan, who is one of our amazing speakers. So stay tuned and check your inbox after the session so you can sign up for that consultation. I'm sure you're wondering why you should be signing up for that consultation. So let me tell you a little bit about Blue Seedling and who we are. We are a boutique enterprise B2B marketing agency and the superpower behind some of the world's top startups and scale-ups. We are very fortunate and proud to work with some companies across different verticals like cybersecurity, DevOps, AI, and many others. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of the names on this list. They're also backed by some of the world's best VCs. In addition, at Blue Seedling, we pride ourselves on creating educational, high-quality B2B marketing content like this webinar, which is why we now have the Blue Seedling Gen AI Digest, which is a monthly newsletter dedicated to sharing the most informative, least salesy articles about how enterprises actually buy and use Gen AI. So I'll also be sharing that link after the webinar is over, and we'll have lots of fun goodies headed your way that I just chatted about. So let's talk about the reason that we're actually here, and I will stop talking in just a bit. I want to introduce our amazing speakers, Jordan and Kim. Jordan is the managing director here at Blue Seedling and leads our brand infrastructure practice. And he'll be sharing his expertise and interviewing Kim, who is executive director of marketing success for Urban Outfitters Nuuly brand. So Jordan and Kim, I'll hand it off to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Thank you so much, Dana. I saw that one of our attendees was a good enough Samaritan to let us know that the chat is disabled so we can work on enabling it. I was kind of feeling a little insecure. Why is everybody being so shy? Usually this is a very social group that like connecting with each other. So we'll look forward to seeing your introductions come across the line as we get the chat back up and running. Thank you once again for joining us today. I'm so thrilled to be here to share on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and to be presenting with the smartest person I know, my colleague and friend, Kim. Fun story, Kim and I actually go back a long time, I won't say how many years, to business school at Wharton. Our careers took very different paths after that. I found myself in the B2B SaaS space. I spent the better part of a decade as the chief product officer for an enterprise B2B customer analytics platform. And during that time, really developed a passion for product marketing, helping companies cut through the noise and tell their story effectively. That's why I lead the positioning and messaging practice at Blue Seedling today, where I've had the pleasure of working with about 24 startups and scale-ups across the globe to help them resonate with their buyers more effectively in competitive markets. I'm by far the less interesting person in this conversation. Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, thanks for the intro, Jordan. And you are very interesting, let me say, and someone that has helped me a great deal throughout the years. But yeah, so I have been at the same company for some time. I've been part of the Urban Outfitters family of brands for the past 13 years or so, since business school, and have worked across a few of our brands, Anthropologie. Then I was working in marketing and analytics roles there, moved to work in a strategy role across the brand portfolio, which includes Urban Outfitters, Free People, Anthropologie. And during that time in the strategy role, got focused on, new business model opportunities for URBN. Started doing some research and work in the space, and got interested in the notion of rental. It was a time where the sharing economy was really taking off in many other industries like hospitality and transportation, and we thought, why not fashion? So worked with a few others to launch a new brand under Urban called Nuuly. Nuuly's a subscription rental business, and for women's apparel. It includes our own brands as well as about 400 other brands that we buy from. And at Nuuly, I oversee marketing, creative analytics, and customer service.
In case this didn't come across clearly, Kim is a seasoned operator and executive, and she's here today to help give us the cheat codes on how, as an AI startup or a startup operating in today's AI environment, you can cut through the noise and sell effectively to enterprise buyers. First, though, we want to understand who the heck you are and where you are on your AI journey. So Dana, can you open the poll? Let's take a quick straw poll of the role that AI plays in your offering. Okay, so options here. You are AI native since day one. You're an AI product. You've added AI features to an existing product. You haven't really done that yet, but you have plans, or you haven't given it much thought, or you don't have a strong point of view on AI yet. So let's take one more minute, and then we'll share the results here. Okay. Drum roll, please, Dana. Let's see what we got. Okay. Really, really good mix here. So the vast majority of folks on the line here have a core product that is AI native or are adding AI features to an existing product. Really interesting to me that the second runner-up here is don't yet have a strong point of view on the role that AI will play in your offering. My hope is that over the course of this conversation, we can help clarify some principles that will be helpful for you as you embark on that journey. So let's dive in. I don't think I'm going to win any prizes for originality here by asserting that AI is eating the world. If you open up your LinkedIn, you will see a heady stream of influencers, investors, thought leaders shouting from the rooftops about the fact that AI is transforming every business and every industry. It's been really interesting to us to see some of the most interesting use cases and applications. We highlight some of these in our Gen AI newsletter. In many cases, these are actually coming from companies themselves that are kind of co-creating opportunities for AI deployment with vendors and realizing very substantial cost savings, efficiency gains, and so forth. So all of this is kind of the backdrop against which we set our story. Now, as with any meteoric trend or rise, there is an equivalently passionate backlash. And what I want to highlight here, in case this is a little less obvious as you go about your day-to-day jobs, is there have been some really, really smart people from all corners of the internet and every industry who are starting to question some of the basic premises or characterize the AI hype as over-exaggerated, not grounded in real-world business results. And so at the same time that we see this incredible fascination and explosion of creativity and imagination around AI, we're seeing some pushback around how useful and transformational it actually is for businesses today. I'm curious to hear, before we dive in on how to resolve this tension, what is the biggest challenge that you face, whether you're AI native, have AI capabilities incorporated into your product, when you pitch your product to potential buyers? So the options here, number one, it's hard for me to stand out in a crowded landscape. Number two, nobody believes what I have to say. Number three, they don't understand what I do. Number four, I'm not sure how to frame this around buyer pain points. Number five, nobody believes that my AI is capable of the technical feats of wizardry that I know it is. Let's take 10 more seconds. The votes are coming in. So I feel like this is a very vulnerable poll. We're like asking you to bare your soul, but the results are anonymous. Okay, Dana, let's pull it up. What are people struggling with? Wow. So it turns out everything is painful. Differentiation, credibility and trust, communicating the value proposition clearly. Um, this is actually a great transition because we will talk about how to solve each and every one of these problems with 5 actionable takeaways for you to put in practice today. Before we get there, though, I thought it might be helpful for Kim to provide a little bit of background on Nuuly's AI journey. So, Kim, maybe give us the double click on how Nuuly operates, and when you talk to colleagues in other industries, whether it's e-commerce, retail, or adjacent verticals, where would you position Nuuly on the path to AI adoption?
Um, I think we're somewhere in maybe a little maybe above the middle of the pack, and I think mostly, but not too far. I think mostly we're only 5 years old, so I would say that was to our advantage as we built a lot of our tech stack. So we're a subscription business, like I said, but so we were able to use some off the shelf or work with third parties for some of our technology, but a lot of the rental needs were not things we could buy off the shelf. So we did build a lot of our tech. And we did have a data science team in house that actually we brought over to work specifically on Nuuly, but roll out some algorithms that we then could incorporate at our sister brands as well. So they're kind of we kind of operate a little bit like a startup within URBN in that regard. When we did launch with some machine learning algorithms, nothing I would say totally crazy or unknown, but things like a recommendations algorithm. We have a dynamic pricing algorithm. So every item that gets shipped out is individually priced based on a number of attributes. All of our inventory is tracked at the unit level. And then we also have some algorithms running within our fulfillment center, like efficiency around picking product. And then finally, I'd say on the generative AI side, we have been working on the customer success side of things. So we do have a generative AI chatbot that we use in conjunction with our team members who are associates, with the goal of solving customer needs as quickly and accurately as possible.
There is a lot that is relevant about Nuuly's experience, and we'll talk about each and every one of these things. Some of the core themes that Kim just spoke to, the tension between build versus buy, the desire to deploy AI for specific use cases, complemented by existing technologies and in-house teams. These are things that we see across every enterprise in the world as they try to get their arms around where AI can be most valuable. Here are the 5 lessons that Kim and I would like to impart to you as you're thinking about how to package, position, and message your AI offering effectively for enterprise adoption. And we'll go through these systematically. Some of these are a little harshly phrased, but we wanted to spice it up a little. Number 1 and number 2 are really about understanding who and what you are positioning against. First, we want to encourage you to separate your investor message from your selling message. And number 2, we want to encourage you to get a realistic appraisal of who is actually in the room that you're up against. It's not who you think it is. Number 3, 4, and 5 here are best practices for you to kickstart your enterprise AI sales motion. AI washing is a term that's been gaining traction, almost always with a negative connotation. We'll challenge that negative connotation and show you how to do it right. We'll give you some pointers on how to keep your eyes on the prize, the people who actually have need, budget, and authority for adoption of enterprise AI applications. And we'll give you a helpful and loving reminder that nobody believes what you have to say and how you garner social proof in an increasingly skeptical era. So let's dive right in and talk about a topic that is a little bit of I feel like I'm potentially a broken record on this a little bit. Before we talk about AI specifically, I want to share with you a story. This is from several years ago. This is a story that was shared by Tom Tungus, the VC, about Box, the cloud storage solution. And he highlighted a really interesting tension that he observed in their marketing strategy. On the one hand, their founder, Aaron Levie, was out there on the thought leadership circuit, talking at conferences, talking to investors about transforming the future of work through collaboration. On the other hand, if you went to Box's website, it was positioned as a simple replacement for FTP. And the key insight here was that Box was simultaneously fighting a war on 2 fronts. They were trying to prime the investor community for a big story of transformational value at the same time that they were trying to cut through the noise with actual buyers with real pain points today. I come back to this all the time, even though this predates the latest AI explosion, because if you look at a random sampling of websites from basically any SaaS industry, what you see is more akin, in my opinion, to an investor relations dossier than to a marketing and sales focused message. I mean, some of these are very exciting, like bringing AI and Gen AI to every point of experience. I don't know what it means, but it sounds like a big idea. The next era of project management being AI first, that sounds compelling. Unparalleled AI, unified customer experience. These are big messages. And Kim and my contention is that too often one of the challenges faced by AI startups is kind of a mushy conflation of a message that resonates with investors with a message that resonates with in-market buyers. I'm old, so I'm not a meme person, but I felt like this could be best communicated by looking at the tension in, let's say, a customer analytics platform between what my investors think I do all the way to what my customers think I do. So if you have gotten in the habit recently of pitching investors, you're probably a data and AI company, regardless of what you do. That being said, your customers who are looking to solve for actual real-world problems today may have a very, very different perspective. They're likely focused on immediate pain points and challenges where they don't see you as a data and AI company. They see you as a better alternative to some existing tech that they're already using today. Kim, you have been pitched a gazillion times by AI companies across the marketing and CX space. Can you share with us some of your perspective when you hear like investor level pitches coming your way?
Yeah, I think the reality is that a lot of the pitches that come in usually via email from companies that focus on AI are pretty broad and pretty generic, and not focused enough on the pain points, or quite frankly, often not really understanding. In my instance, we are not a traditional retail company, even though we sit under the Urban Outfitters umbrella. So we don't even have like a traditional cart and checkout, for example, or like some of those elements. So I'd say they're missing a lot of that basic understanding that and without that, my interest is typically not piqued, because I'm like, well, they built something that won't even be relevant for me, first of all, or it's so broad that I'm like, do they really think like our whole experience is broken and we need AI to solve every aspect of it? Because I would say most people that you're pitching probably don't have that view of their own company and are instead focused on pretty specific and discrete pain points.
And just in the interest of talking through what was involved in the actual implementation of AI for you guys, can you share a little bit about you went all in on Gen AI for CX, and it was not a plug and play experience of transforming CX to be AI centric. What was the real world experience like from realizing that you needed something to help you scale through actually implementing something that was real world facing?
Yeah, I would say I mean I don't know that we've gone all in, but we are on a journey of continuing to incorporate AI to make our experience better. So the way our business works, customers receive 6 items a month, and they give, and so there's a lot of opportunity, and we send them via UPS. There's just a lot of opportunity for things to not go smoothly, whether it's a problem with an individual garment or with the shipment or um, you name it. We get a lot of feedback. We have a lot, it's a heavy interaction business. So we knew, I mean, we've seen it firsthand. We've been in the fortunate position of growing pretty quickly as a company, but our number of interactions and therefore our number of CS associates that we need on the team has scaled with along with that growth. I'd say to the extent that it's it's getting unwieldy in terms of the size of the team and managing and training. So it did feel like a great area where AI could provide a lot of value. We also know that, you know, there are certainly instances where customers need to and should talk to a human, but there are many that they just want a problem solved quickly and accurately. So we actually assess things from the ground up. There's some things that our tech team could handle internally, like building new flows that where if you needed to pause your account and get a refund, our systems could check that on their end. But there are others that we partnered with our chat provider, which is Intercom. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Intercom. They were also embarking as our really pretty much every probably chat provider on really ramping up their efforts in AI. We jumped on board right away, and and we were not going to really benefit necessarily from any other client, like the kind of the learning that maybe their chatbot had from any other clients, because our interactions are just so different and distinct to our business. So what we decided to do in order to make this effective for Nuuly, we actually hired someone full time who really just focuses on training the bot, and that means, you know, writing new articles, tweaking articles that we include on our site places and within the Intercom tool as well. Just giving it and also monitoring interactions, seeing where we can improve. It took that heavy kind of level of investment and commitment from the CS team side as well. They also had to be all bought in on this, which they were. But since we've done that, we've become like a really good trusted partner of Intercom. We're able to get access to any kind of early betas that they're rolling out, and it's worked to our advantage. But it definitely had to become a strategy that required a lot of commitment on our end.
So, Kim, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like the real world considerations for an actual buyer, what you just described, focused on specific pain points, evaluating build versus buy or status quo versus new investment, very vertical specific and constraint driven is kind of the opposite of what works well for investors. Right? When you're trying to secure funding at a massive multiple, you're trying to tell a story of future upside and transformative market shifts. Oftentimes you get rewarded for pioneering or trying to pioneer a new category. Use cases are kind of like a secondary. Your primary competitors are other hot startups in the same space. And generally speaking, you want to position yourself as horizontally applicable across every industry. It sounds like Nuuly's approach, and we hear this from enterprise that we work with, is very driven by loss aversion and pain points today, like the cost associated with adding more agents as your support volume increases, You're largely considering within the context of an existing set of categories, identifying use cases to deploy for a pilot or to demonstrate early success is non-negotiable. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, the primary competition is often status quo. So like, is this something that we can do with our existing tech stack or technical resources? And there's a high level of vertical customization and tailoring that's required to actually get it off the ground. Is that a fair characterization? This sounds a little grim, but it seems like we're solving for two very different problems when we pitch to investors versus to enterprise buyers.
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I'd say that that one row around the primary competitors is definitely key. I think that what I just described, like what we did with Intercom. Intercom was already our chat provider. There it was a lot. Our first pass was going to be to go to Intercom and see if they could help us. Before evaluating other options. I will say that there are areas of our business where I don't feel like our current provider is necessarily as far along in the AI space as we wish they were. But there are a lot of things that we're pretty clear internally about the fact that, it doesn't make sense for us to do this ourselves. We should be working with a company with expertise. However, ideally that's a company we already work with. So if you're trying to cut through that noise, I think really understanding who the incumbent is, and even if they have AI capabilities that are far inferior to what you're pitching, being able to point that fact out, I think is pretty critical, because the switching costs of getting onto a new integrating with a new technology are just high, and sometimes they also involve hurdles that someone might not want to go through, like dealing with legal or making sure that things are set up in the financial system, or properly budgeted for, all of that. I think that's just the reality is or I'd say that like a common thing that we might get pitched on is like AI tools around workplace productivity and project management. Our whole team is on our project management system, so it is that would be a big lift to kind of get everyone trained and comfortable using something new. So definitely think about the incumbent in the category.
I'm so delighted that you talked about who the actual competitors are, and we'll double click on that. But first, three quick takeaways for those who are listening. Actual real world buyers, the Kims of the world, are not looking to reinvent or transform. I mean, maybe in their personal lives, but generally speaking, they're looking to solve for concrete, well understood pain points in their day-to-day role. Costs spiraling out of control, operational friction. The more that you can focus your selling message on those specific use cases and steer clear of broad horizontal generalizations about the transformative power of data and AI, the better from a selling standpoint. In fact, we would encourage everybody kind of like write down two different versions of your positioning statement or your pitch, your investor pitch and your buyer pitch, and never the twain shall meet. The more that you can keep those stories distinct, the better off you'll be when it comes to driving pipeline in market. What Kim touched on at the end here, I think, is a really important point, and we'll transition to a more full-fledged discussion of this momentarily, that AI, while it is magical in so many ways, unfortunately does not alleviate some of the real-world constraints around switching costs, integration, configuration, legal review that are involved in buying and deploying enterprise software. And that's why it is so important to keep a realistic view in mind of who your actual competitors are. When we talk to AI startups, more often than not, when we ask them to identify who their core competition is, they'll point to other incredibly smart, fast-moving startups in the space. But what we would encourage you to think about is the two most potent / lethal competitors out there who may not be top of mind. Number one is status quo / good enough / in-house. And the second is incumbents who are already in the room where it happens, Like that, they already have the ear of your buyers. They're deployed in your buyer's environment already. They've gone through legal review and MSA. Kim, I want to double click on what you talked about just now. Tell us a little bit about each of these. So status quo slash we can cobble together something good enough in-house. What's an example of a problem for your business where good enough is good enough?
I would say this comes up a lot on the data science side. So we have an internal team. They're great. They're very busy. So getting, but there's a lot that they can kind of quickly spin up from, let's say from an algorithm or an analytical model perspective. Is it the best? Is it going to be the best model we can possibly have? Usually no, because they have broad expertise and they are not specifically focused on, let's say, one type of marketing model. But it is good enough often to keep us moving along and not take the time to onboard a new partner. And I will say there are instances where we do go external in this kind of thing. I don't want to make it seem like we never consider that, and I think there are cases where it makes a lot of sense. But if we're talking about like we can get 90% of the way there, like something we can build in house is 90% or even like 80% as good as what an external player can bring to the table. We're probably just going to say this is good enough. Let's keep it moving. So, and then, I think I already touched on some of the kind of incumbents that are already in the room. They're just going to be the first stop. It's just easier. Selling in a new vendor requires a lot of buy-in across a broader org. When somebody already has that buy-in, it's one less step. And that obviously doesn't even include all of the work that goes into not just the legal and the finance side, but then also the onboarding training side of the house.
So Kim, if you wanted to arm folks on this webinar with like a couple arrows in the quiver, what recommendations would you have for taking aim at good enough is good enough and taking aim at incumbents? Like how do you compete effectively against status quo or a massive provider that already has deep roots in the organization that you're trying to sell into?
I'd say for the good enough is good enough. I think to the extent that you can, understanding the internal competency of who you're pitching is probably useful. That's probably not always possible, but I'd say bringing proof points to the table of where a similar company did take a leap of doing something with an external partner versus the internal path and proving that it was more than just marginally better. I think that is very useful. In terms of the incumbents already in the room, I think this one is you might not know, like let's use big partner examples like a company CRM provider. You might not know who they are. You might have a way to get at it. But I think that even if you don't know the exact one, you know who you're generally up against, who the big players. So even like kind of throwing out like you may work with a company like X, Y, or Z. Here's why working with a company like ours would add value, and just I would just face that head on because that is the reality of what they're thinking about.
I absolutely love this. The the takeaways for me are that status quo. This is probably true not just for AI, for every SaaS sale in the world, right? Like status quo, good enough is the biggest enemy. The particular twist here is in addition to building something in-house or making do with a 90% solution, you're going up against the intercoms of the world who have a well-publicized $100 million investment in AI. I think Kim just shared some really powerful takeaways, like agitate the pain, make the status quo intolerable by pointing out all of the loss from a 90% solution and be 10x better at something. Like identify a place where you can take aim at what can be done in-house or what can be done by the incumbents. Just assume that that is the most significant competitive landscape that you're going up against and make that the cornerstone of your positioning. I want to shift gears here a little and talk about AI washing. Have folks heard this term before? I don't know. Maybe this is like inside the building talk. You can probably reason by analogy to other better publicized forms of washing. Our friends at Forbes have a particularly mean-spirited definition of AI washing, exaggerating the capabilities of a product or service that's sold as AI in order to make it seem better than it is. For the purposes of this conversation, I would like to adopt a more value-neutral definition, which is around deliberately and strategically promoting your AI capabilities, whether they're new or emerging, to connect with a specific audience. This is not an ethical debate over whether you should do it or should not do it. My assumption, based on the fact that you're on this webinar, is that you have some interest in understanding how to harness your AI capabilities for competitive advantage. And whether or not we like it, this is happening all over the darn place. I thought it would be fun just putting myself in Kim's shoes to take a look at what's out there, when we audit the world of CX. The degree of AI washing going on, I think you'd be really, really hard pressed to find a single provider in this space that is not centering their AI messaging. So the ship has left the harbor. Everybody's doing it. How do you do it well? Well, Kim, we're going to enlist you in doing a real-time website showdown. Here's the way it works. We're going to look at two providers in a given category. This may be a category that you know well or a category that you know less well. And I'm going to ask you for your quick 10-second read on what works well or doesn't work, and ultimately which is a more effective way of AI washing a core set of capabilities. So we'll start with a category that you have a ton of experience in, which is site search. The use case here is I'm on an e-commerce site. I want to find Chukka boots. It's hard to navigate through all the product pages. I just type something into the search. There's a lot of money in figuring out how to deliver better results to me based on what my inferred search intent is. So Kim, not to put you on the spot here, what do you see when you look at our friends on the left and our friend on the right? Set aside who the specific vendor is.
Okay. On the left, artificial intelligence powered recommender as a service. I don't really know what that means. I mean, I know what a recommender algorithm is, but I don't know. It just feels like, okay, glazed over. It's too broad. I don't know. I'm not sold. Okay. Great search results with relevance on day one. I do feel like anyone who's worked with search knows that there's a cold start problem with search, or launching anything new really. So I do feel like, and I have worked, we actually just redid our search engine. So I do feel like hitting that relevance on day one would pique the interest. Honestly, like AI or not, a company that's good at getting good results on day one is very interesting in the search space.
Okay, so is it fair to say unnamed vendor number one? Well, it's not unnamed. Vendor number one is taking a big swing, asserting themselves as a new category of AI technology, but the actual value prop is somewhat unclear. Vendor two has identified a pain point that is already reasonably top of mind for folks who are evaluating technology in the space. The AI messaging is a bit subtler if you consider, above and below the fold
Yep.
subtle.
Yep.
But it's a more effective selling message, more effective way of AI washing a core set of capabilities.
Absolutely.
Any recommendations for vendor number two? What would take this from good to great or good to better?
I'm happy with vendor number two, how they're positioned. I would say like how it works, like for me, the big message, great search results with relevance on day one, that's going to pique my interest. I do think the AI is how they do it, which isn't really for me, what I'm looking for in the pitch, I'm looking for what do you do? Now I will say though, your audience, like my boss, who's President Nuuly, is also the Chief Technology Officer at URBN. He likes to hear AI in a pitch. Like, so you're not always like, it's somewhat like someone that's more of a technologist, maybe wants AI in there somewhere, but I still think the specificity of the message really resonates.
Love it. So AI as a reason to believe that we can deliver on some unique capability that speaks to a pain point you ever in the cold start for site search. Okay. You know site search really well. I'm assuming, Kim, unless you have a parallel life that I know less about, you're not an HR professional at an organization. So apply the same lens of like, enterprise, the enterprise sales process and enterprise buying mindset to a category that's a little less familiar to you. So here on the left, we have enterprise or everything talent powered by AI. And on the right, we have parse and match resume data with job description in bulk.
I mean,
Reactions?
yeah, like absolutely number two. Number one is just that it is almost suspicious to me that something can be so vague. Like I don't know. I really wouldn't take the time to learn more. But I do think for number two, parse and match resume data, which like there is, I don't work in HR, but I know that certain jobs we post get so many resumes inbound, and like that is a pain point of just doing that resume review. So I think that is a specific pain point. It also it just off the cuff, again, not as an HR person, it doesn't feel like it would be such a crazy hard thing to integrate. Like it feels really like specific and not so hard. So definitely more interesting.
Okay. So just to summarize what we're hearing here. Thank you, Kim. Sorry to make you the guinea pig for this side by side, but you did great. And if anybody's hiring for HR tech, Kim seems qualified. Um, number one, maybe this is obvious to folks on the phone, but I think a quick audit of messaging within basically every SaaS category establishes beyond the shadow of a doubt that AI is table stakes, not a differentiator. A less charitable way of putting that is slapping AI powered or AI driven into your website tagline is not going to help you stand out from the noise. What I really like about Kim's real-time reaction here, and this gets a little bit to separating the investor pitch from the buyer pitch, is what made Kim and my eyes light up is the specificity, right? Like the most effective AI pitches when the goal is to connect with a champion or buyer are anchored on a specific use case. There's a well-known pain point, and extra credit for identifying the specific ways that AI can actually solve that pain point. AI becomes like one supporting point in service of your larger message. When we work with clients in the AI space, we see this times 100, right? The most effective form of AI washing, I wouldn't even call it AI washing, is integrating AI into a message that is focused on a laser sharp ICP set of use cases and set of pain points, and treating AI as a reason to believe. Kim, you touched on something so intriguing, which is the divergence between the way that a technical buyer or evaluator thinks from the way that a business buyer thinks. This is also something that we, one of the most commonly posed questions that we get from our clients is, hey, I'm struggling with a scenario where the tech team is really interested in kicking the tires or learning more about our technology solution, but we're falling down in the evaluation process when we get in front of actual business users who don't seem interested or feel coerced by their tech team into adopting something that they don't have a need for. From our conversation, I understand this, you are no stranger to this dynamic. Tell us a little bit about how this plays out at Nuuly.
Yeah, so I do think I will say I think there are instances where the tech team is the end user, and that's like let's put that to the side because I think they are really great at vetting those kind of solutions. But I think otherwise, if the solution is a business problem, I think the business user is the right first point of contact. Getting the business user sold in, who then should be pulling in the appropriate tech partners to vet, like, you know, the integration and all any of the tech needs. That's critical. But if the business user isn't the champion, they're quite frankly, they're the ones with the budget. They're the ones that are going to be ultimately signing off and getting the buy-in on this. But I have absolutely seen things come in through the tech team. They're generally, I would say, things that are really out. They're solving needs with AI in functional areas that are really outside the core competency of a tech team, or that can happen. And I'll use it as an example. There's a lot of AI solutions in the creative space. Any creative team is not necessarily going to jump when the tech team sends over an AI solve for their area, unless your tech team happens to be incredibly creative. And I think in our company, creative is kind of the core competency of the company. So making sure that any kind of AI solve is first and foremost championed by the creative team is like absolutely critical. But so I would say just go to the business user first.
Yeah. You highlighted an interesting nuance earlier when you were talking about have a story for the CTO, right? Like there's going to be a technical layer of evaluation at some point in the process.
Absolutely. Yep.
But unless you have enlisted a business user with a searing and immediate pain point on day one,
Yep.
it's unlikely that you'll get to the stage where the technical story becomes relevant.
Absolutely.
Okay. So here are some takeaways for folks. Technical teams, maybe a crush is a little too simplistic. It's like a love-hate relationship, but we've seen time and time again that there are IT and technical teams that have explicit goals around tire kicking, evaluating new technology, understanding what's out there. And for that reason, it's really important to recognize as you're pitching a Kim that you're at some point going to get in front of the CTO and the tech team. You need a story for them. But the first port of entry should be the actual business user, unless your core end user is the tech team. And it's essential to articulate the value to business buyers through the mindset of use cases and the cost of alternative solutions early and often. Okay. No one believes you. It's funny. We talk a lot about AI as a gold rush. For those on the phone like myself who grew up in California, the actual California gold rush is still a required part of the curriculum. So you spend like 3 years in middle school learning about it. And one of the things that you learn is that it became a self-reinforcing ecosystem of stakeholders who all had a financial stake in promoting the gold rush, right? Like the axe pick vendors, the travel vendors, so you can see like a cruise line advertising that getting there is half the fun, the local economy. And I perceive, and I think Kim, you agree, a similar dynamic in the AI space where it feels like everybody, the network of vendors, consultants, even executives who have bought AI and want to position themselves as smart early adopters, there's kind of this echo chamber that has made traditional forms of social proof a little less effective than they used to be. So I'd like to ask you, in this insane echo chamber gold rush environment, who do you actually trust, and how do you get the real deal on what AI can do or not do for you?
Well, yeah, it is hard because it's like it's literally in every pitch and every pitch you hear about, and just like in every other conversation. But and you know, I'd say that like I am always trying to learn more about the space and always curious. And I think one of the places I have found myself going to learn more is LinkedIn. And I have found that there are certain people that, you know, either I'm following or somehow begin to get recommended to me, that are contributing some really valuable insights about this space. And often I don't know them. I don't necessarily have top of mind a particular pain point that, like, I'm not seeking out their company explicitly. It's kind of it tends to be founders, although it could really be any employee from the company that writes something compelling that hooks me on LinkedIn. uh, I will read, and it gives me that, like, that's the credibility I'm looking for. Somebody that can, in a longer format than maybe like a quick email pitch, actually um, give some nuanced thought around the topic.
I love this, and I'll raise the stakes a little bit. We've seen that in this crazy, noisy landscape of opinions and hype cycle around AI. One of the most effective ways for early stage startups to cut through the noise is through what we call founder launchpad platform. It's basically a fancy way of saying get your founder, CEO, executive team out there, articulating in an authentic, warts and all way what's going on in the space, not in a salesy like LinkedIn ad way, but what are the challenges for
Yeah.
companies that are trying to build, use, deploy AI at scale. Um, this can go so far as even if you're an AI vendor, like talk about what is wrong. Like, what is it that we and others in this space get wrong? This kind of unmediated authenticity from founders, often talking about challenges and problems, is so valuable for framing for an enterprise buyer what
Yeah.
the journey is going to look like for them to get to the promised land.
Yeah, I'd say actually, like, I used to probably go more so to Twitter for when I'm like, a lot of my Twitter feed was very much like people in the tech startup space or marketing space. The algorithm there has kind of like changed and gotten a little crazier. So I do find myself going to LinkedIn more so now, and getting kind of this. And obviously, there's like a little bit more long form storytelling available on LinkedIn.
So Kim, if we had to summarize what the takeaways are for folks on the line, traditional social proof has lost some luster in a world where there is a cottage industry for promoting and hyping up AI. It creates an environment where authentic founder-led content focused on real-world challenges is really resonating. And something that you touched on, and I would encourage everyone to take away, it's not just founders, by the way, like employee-generated content, especially for technical members of the team who are involved in confronting the challenges of building AI products firsthand, that can really be gold and help to solve these challenges around social proof and the gap between buyers and sellers. Okay, we've covered 10,000 miles of ground, but let's just quickly recap some of the most important takeaways. Number one, please don't give prospects your investor message. It's really important to have a story for both of them, but where we see companies fall down is where they confuse them or mush them. Write down a separate pitch for your investors and for your prospects. The prospect pitch should be focused on pain points, use cases, and challenges today. And your primary goal should be to differentiate against your actual competitors, who more often than not are status quo, building in-house, or large incumbents being evaluated for kind of AI capabilities and features. And your goal should be to pour salt in the wound of existing pain points, like agitate the pain point and identify places where you are 10x better than status quo or incumbents. AI washing is a great tactic, but do it right. Again, where AI is in the service of supporting or validating your differentiated value. Keep your eyes on the prize, meaning unless you are a product intended for technical teams, have an ironclad story for your business buyer that you are helping them evangelize internally from day one. And number five, as you think about marshaling social proof, think about non-traditional formats like founder launchpad platform and employee generated content to help you tell your story when you're not in the room. Let's take a few minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, I'm gonna open us up with the first one, but everybody feel free to drop all of your questions in the chat that is now open. And if you don't have any questions, feel free to throw in how you're going to incorporate these lessons that we just had to chatted about in your AI marketing. So first question, how do you speak to specific use cases and verticals if they are genuinely horizontal platforms that do it all?
So, okay, I'm an AI vendor with a genuinely industry agnostic solution, and I need to find a way to build credibility with Kim around the CX use case.
Yep.
I don't know. Kim, what do you recommend?
I mean, I'll say that like personally, it's not that relevant to me that you are horizontal or can solve all these needs. I'm only interested in the need that I have. So even if you are, still be specific about the pitch. It's kind of maybe along the way, I learned that you also have other capabilities in other areas, and maybe that's room to grow in the future. But upfront, still be specific.
One very nuts and bolts, nut and bolts way of approaching this, if you're thinking about your website, for example, would be to have vertical specific landing pages or use case specific landing pages, which show translate your message into a high degree of specificity around like a particular buying trigger, a reason that a person might buy you to solve a specific problem. Same thing with sales decks. We're big proponents of like modular sales decks. If you're going into a pitch with Kim, she doesn't care about the fact that you work with, I don't know, defense, automotive. Like have a vertical story just for her. I think one consequence, by the way, is increasingly we see verticalization of AI providers. Like the returns to specialization and verticalization are very great because you build a body of social proof. You really understand the ins and outs of the use case. And so you might be thinking horizontal today, but you'll likely find a couple of vertical centers of gravity in the near future.
Love those answers. We have one more that just came in. What objects need to be addressed upfront regarding the downsides of AI, such as capturing customer data to train your models, hallucinations, etc.?
Ooh, I love that. Kim, what?
Um,
So the scenario here is somebody comes to pitch you on an AI solution. You've read the news and had maybe bad experience on your own with AI that didn't work well, security issues, hallucination issues. How directly should vendors address the well-known objections?
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to, I would say that's like a good thing that I would write in a LinkedIn post of like when you can kind of explain it with more context and it's not addressed to like a specific to a specific person. But in a pitch, I don't think you need to address that directly, although it might be helpful to offer a proof point of a company you have worked with, and if they're credible, that might go a long way. And you can have that in a follow-up conversation, but I would say not necessarily in the pitch.
My 2 cents on this, not very helpful, is it depends. The best resource that I've found on this, for the record, is a wonderful book called Sales Pitch by the legendary product marketing leader April Dunford, and she has the whole section on like should you objection handle in the sales process. Her takeaway is if you are talking to a buyer for whom objections make it impossible to move forward, like you know that they've had a failed AI deployment previously, they're in a space where customer data security is a prime concern. It's often to your benefit to explicitly address these things and talk about how you overcome them. I, I would say that's not the majority of conversations that I've been involved in with enterprise buyers. And to Kim's point, you kind of have to read the room and identify if, unless an objection is going to become a blocker to the sale, it's something that you can have material on, but keep it in your back pocket.
Oh, we are right at time, so I'm gonna close this out. Thank you all for joining us today and for all of the good questions that you asked. If we didn't get to them, feel free to sign up for that consultation with Jordan or rewatch this recording and keep an eye out for all of that in your inbox. And a special thanks to Jordan and Kim for being amazing speakers today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.